side of the internet, there are many videos detailing quiet BPD. However, these tend to be more from the learned views of psychoanalysts via cold clinical text and the analysis of patients. I wanted to describe this mood disorder not from the outside looking in, but from the inside looking out. It has been many years since I was diagnosed with this disorder. Indeed, my patient notes detailed the suspicion on my mood disorder since I was 14. It would be many years later, at the age of 27, after my attempted unaliving, where I would learn of this diagnosis by the casual reference to it during a consultation. I was curious to understand why, since I was the one living with it, I was not told what I had. Was this a result of lack of faith in the diagnosis? Was it my age? Was it the stigma? It seems I will never know. How many doctors have briefly scanned my notes over the years? A long chain of fractured professionals trying to piece together this lifelong tapestry of complex interwoven threads. There was always a pressure building within me. It grew and grew day by day. It mirrored my protagonist in my novel. I was perpetually guarding against humanity, you see. I learned to hide what I felt, and as I grew older, I became increasingly skilled at embodying this ambiguous modus operandi. I was sullen, indifferent, silent as death, skulking about in the hinterlands, trying to release this ultra-compressed emotion. My arms carried 2 decades of crises that I learned to hide as I got older. Bio-oil and the long sleeves was a good remedy for this, and as I gathered more knowledge of the world, I become more adept in the arts of acting, and as my scars now moved down to my legs and my smiles more on command, despite if you looking into my eyes, it never really carried its true countenance. There is a silent chaos with this mood disorder, a private hell, if you will, that seldom breaches the surface of day-to-day life. There was all of the torment that is typical of this disorder, an increase in suicide attempts as the woe was directed inwards. With the typical borderline, it is rage and screaming directed at whoever is unfortunate enough to be within your orbit. This energy unleashed into the world and projected from the shadow in the varying shapes it so happens to cast against, like some dark wizard. Oh, how often the ones closest to me would scold me for my antisocial ways, not knowing it was self-protection, survival even. How often they would tire of my presence, feeling something deeply wrong and yet not being able to pinpoint directly to the source, and only the tip of the black iceberg they would see, complain against unknowingly, while I faced this full permafrost horror beneath every second of my existence. Yes, tired, are you? Oh yes, tired indeed. Not even my dreams were spared, where all this pressure of emotion would release itself in curious theatrical ways, dramatised symbols, waging war in the space between the waves of I and sleep. And I would cling to one specific friend like a buoy that would keep you above the waves, some anchor of stability, and many years as I could, knowing that all things come to an end. I would accept any behaviour or tribulation against me, any manner of betrayal. For if you do not love yourself, all things are permissible. I would bounce from romantic relationship to relationship like stormy waves of the sea, unsteady, rhythmic in their highs and lows, resolute with my unconscious flow, knowing there was no use in decorating the Titanic, and like the musicians who played their instruments into the icy depths, knowing that hysteria would be of no consequence. I came to understand that presenting negative emotions begot negative emotions, and fearing a spiraling descent, I became adept at the art of the calm exterior. What is it? It is intense emotion, self-blame, masking distress, chronic shame, imploding supervolcanic eruptions. It is the introverted classical BPD. It is silence, stonewalking, ghosting and withdrawal. One day you would see me, and due to some unregistered slight the other day, you would never see me again. Phone calls wouldn't go through. All social media disappeared like a ghost. I was gone. There is still volatility, but it is in solitude it was expressed. and it is why I spend the majority of my time alone. Not only to conserve energy I need to exist, but also to protect myself against the sharp world my less layered skin would wound against. I was a ship in a stormy sea without an anchor, and I was a social chameleon, well equipped to change its colour on demand. The problem is, I never really knew who I was, why it goes unnoticed. BPD's expression likely goes through a few filters in its final expression. Nature and nurture, culture and medications, I suppose. England isn't like America. We don't value loud noises. We don't particularly want to know how we feel. The famous stiff bottom lip, the royal decree of never explain, never complain. Therefore, I learned that in order to survive, I had to become invisible, retreat into the background, live in that liminal space. Even when I was present, my mind somehow lived somewhere else. Perhaps the curse of self-awareness was interfacing as well. The tortuous awareness of every pixel of emotion so clearly analysed. The detail and resolution of every micro-expression in my internal landscape. Oh, the agonising. It's exhausting. I would use any combination of words as long as the adjacent party was rent content. I'd learned that the particular colour of hell that visited me when my father would snarl the drunken words. You're a waste of space. I say this now as a father myself, and I no longer feel the weight of the scene, but as a child I cannot deny its impact on my life. Those words were devastating beyond description as a child who did not differentiate between themselves and their parents, and how different would my life have been if I had a parent supportive and loving. I know very well that I have small t trauma, and I try not to declare myself a victim. I know they did their best, but I cannot obfuscate their impact on my personality, which was apparently a very disorder in itself. However, this curious combination of masking, people pleasing and internalisation often goes unnoticed, or is it misbranded as depression with some interesting kinks? The rock and a hard place. Quiet BPD is sometimes small t trauma, or indeed classical trauma. In its essence, it is a concentrated personality that with a normal upbringing would have produced an artist of some description, or a sensitive soul without the skeptical hypervigilance. Anyone who meets me but knows me from a distance will say I'm intelligent, articulate, thoughtful, atypical perhaps, but reflective and stable. And this is the very veneer of the high-functioning exterior. How they don't see the supernovas within. I conceal them every day. If they looked closer, they would see the erratic movement of the foot, the scars, the inability to do the most simple of things, such as engage in small talk with a neighbour, open a letter addressed to me in name, manage finance, or make a new friend, God forbid. If quiet BPD was a black hole sun, then the core is shame. Anger is the usual manifestation in BPD in its core, but shame, yes, as Jung said, shame is a soul-eating emotion. It is the lowest vibrational frequency in emotions and is absolutely intolerable to feel. I would do anything but sit in the abyss of shame. Violence against the flesh, danger against the soul, especially when I was younger. There was nothing I would not do to not feel it. The paradox of connection. Perhaps the most tragic paradox of this disorder is the simultaneous longing for human connection and the equally powerful counterweight fear of it. How often my psyche would sing the song of society in the morning, and by the evening I would vow never to venture again into the public square, nor ever breach the eye line of humanity. Actions like a love in a child, a feeling filled with such deep beauty, yet constantly shadowed by the fear of what might happen to them in this fragile life of ours. Love and fear, they stand side by side, it seems. Inside me, these forces often felt like two titans wrestling in perpetual combat. Sometimes one would win and I would seek friendship and companionship. Sometimes the other would win and I would retreat into a desolate solitude. As adulthood progressed, one of those titans slowly began to dominate. I spend much more time alone these days. Many of my friendships of youth have faded. People have families now, responsibilities, separate lives. But if I am honest, I do not pursue society the same way I once did. Perhaps that is simply the natural course of adulthood. Perhaps it reflects the direction of society itself. Or perhaps it is simply the direction my own life has taken. It is the truth, nonetheless. I love humanity, but when confronted with the individual, I often find myself lacking final reflection. And yet there is something else hidden within this temperament. The same emotional intensity that creates suffering also creates depth. It allows beauty to be felt more intensely. Art, music, nature, the academy of ideas, it is both a gift and a curse. And perhaps why I'm making this very video. Because quiet suffering rarely attracts attention, it does not erupt loudly enough to demand recognition. And yet beneath this calm veneer there may exist a dense gravity, powerful enough to shape an entire life. Sometimes the most difficult struggles are not the ones that explode into the world, but the ones that collapse inward, hollowing themselves into a silent singularity, a black hole sun, insatiable, not content with the mass of stars, but drawing in all that drifts too close to its perilous orbit. And so it remains unseen, passing quietly, consuming one generation to the next.